Fellow travelers along the path of the beam, I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please ya, join me here for a little bit of palaver with my quartet, our quartet, on Hail to Stephen King. That is right, y'all. That's right. I'm back to my typical demeanor of being excited to actually talk about Cy King, my favorite author. I know I was kind of bump on a log in that last one talking about the Dark Tower movie, so I apologize. I cry your pardon for that. It is back to business as usual, me being stoked as fuck to be talking about El Rey, and this is a bit of coverage that I know I have been hinting at since I finally stumbled across that audio drama of The Mist. I was like, okay, I finally have access to all 4 of the crucial components that are different iterations of Stephen King's classic novella, The Mist. Now, The Mist was originally published in Dark Forces, which was kind of a collection with him and a bunch of other different writers in 1980, and then it was later collected, yep, that's right, here in Skeleton Crew in 1985, I believe, yep, and that's where basically most people were probably exposed to it, at least until the film came out in 2007, I want to say, yeah, the Frank Darabont masterpiece, if you ask me. And so, last year, when there was a Mist television series coming out on Spike TV, which is no longer even in existence, they got rebranded and something completely different now. I think they're like the Paramount Network or something. I don't know. That was a within the universe of the Mist kind of thing, very similar to what we're seeing from Castle Rock right now. That, you know, I talked a lot of smack about it, as did a lot of other people. Viewers tuned in initially in droves, over 1 million, in precious demographics, the 18 to 35 I think it is, and so on. And so it had some really strong ratings initially. Everybody knows how celebrated the Darabont film was, so I think audiences came in with the promise of other tales, you know, that, you know, could be shown within that universe of The Mist, and they were like, oh, this could be dope, and then a few episodes in they realized that it really wasn't, and the show ended up getting canceled after 1 season. But after realizing that I now had access to all of these, I was like, okay, what you need to do over the course of a weekend, man, you need to, first and foremost, reread the source material, reread the novella, and it's barely over a hundo, you know, it's like 112 pages, I want to say. So for me, that's a quick read. That's like a night of reading. That's a couple hours, you know, chill out, you know, glass of wine, your favorite easy chair, and this amazing Stephen King story on your hardcover or tablet, or, you know, they also have it available in just a little paperback novella kind of thing, or listen to the audiobook, which is tremendous and is also available floating around on the Audibles and audiobooks.com and places like that. Well worth a purchase, because it's actually very, very well read there as well. But, you know, I was like, okay, I'm going to first read, which I did, then I'm going to listen to the audiobook, and I did both of those in the same night, actually. So I started out around 7-ish after getting back from the hotel, and then I, you know, spent a few hours reading. Then I spent a little over an hour with this audio drama that was produced in 1992, I think, 91, 92, something like that. I didn't write that down in my notes, derps. But yeah, it was an early 90s endeavor, boasting the 3D sound, a whole list of different voice actors and stuff like that. And back in the 90s as a kid, I was super into that sort of approach. I devoured the Star Wars audio dramas, specifically for stuff like Shadows of the Empire and, you know, the stuff with Thrawn, you know, tons of different things, you know, Tales from Jabba's Palace, Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina. The Last Command is the one that I was thinking of. There's 3 different Thrawn novels, they're all dopeness. But, so yeah, I was really into the audio dramas for a while there. I'm sad that they don't really do them as often anymore. I know they're a bigger production because there's sound effects, there's often score, multiple actors instead of something amazing like we got from the Dexter dude doing the entirety of the Pet Sematary novel himself. And really talented voice actors like that, they throw their voices in different directions. They play the characters and they enunciate differently. They hit you with different accents, speech patterns, and, you know, they are just really able to distinguish in that factor. So I can understand why they're like, hey, let's just do this shizzle on the cheap, man, and let's just get one person who really knows their game, you know, and just rolls with it. So After doing that, I watched the film the next night, and I watched the Darabont film in its black and white, which is my first time doing it since purchasing that 2-disc special edition DVD. There's so much amazing supplemental features and stuff on both that and the Blu-ray. They have identical features because that was at least released when Blu-ray was a little bit newer to the scene, and so it wasn't like you had to purchase the Blu-ray to get every single special feature, because now what they do truly pisses me off, because unless it's like a big visual spectacle of a film, I don't always think it's merited to spend that extra money, especially when you have a good Blu-ray player that upconverts anyway, and if there isn't a lot of effects or anything like that, it's really going to look pretty much just as good. But they have this new trend of the DVDs are bare bones like the old rental copies used to be, and then to get the supplemental stuff, which you can't get with digital, and which you can't get, with if you get something that's previously been in a red box or something like that, the glorified Blockbuster as it is now. Yeah, you end up having to purchase either the 4K or the Blu-ray to get that special stuff. And so I love supplemental features, and so I devoured all of those. There's some great, talks with Darabont, inspiration from, everything from cast to the pre-production aspect, how long he wanted to work on that. So I think it's one of the best King adaptations ever. It's up there with some of the biggest and heaviest hitters, and so I had a glorious time rewatching that, but especially in black and white, which is Darabont's preferred way for people to watch it. And then I took a couple days trying to get back into the Mist TV series. It's on Netflix, so if you want to take the time to watch those 10 episodes, each episode's only about 40 minutes long, because they take out all the commercials, which are obviously very heavy on the Spike Network, because you can always see when there's like a 45 to 50 minute show versus a show that's like 39, 41, 42 minutes, something like that. So they were really milking the advertising time pretty heavy on Spike TV, which doesn't really surprise me with the history of that network. And I had watched the premiere when it first came out, and I was like, this isn't too bad. I like how they're playing in the playground and yet giving a little nod here or there, but changing things up. Once again, very similar to what Castle Rock is doing. But by the third or fourth episode, they totally lost me with characters that I didn't find myself caring very much about. I was pissed that there was a very low creature content in contrast, especially with the Darabont film, and just some of the crazy deaths, and some of the CGI may not hold up as well in the Darabont film, but watch it in black and white and it just all fits a little bit better and it doesn't look quite as fake. But I'm not going to give you my thoughts on fully watching the Mist TV series, all 10 episodes, until the very end, because we're going to go in chronological order. So 1980, once again, this was first published before it eventually hit in 1985, and the novella of The Mist is, it's terrific, I love the Lovecraft nods. I love the whole just, meddling government inadvertently through their studies, opening up a portal, a thinny, if you will, to another world. And if you really jump on King's, which I just did in a reread with talking with a longtime supporter of the show, Eva, about this just yesterday. I was reading Robin Firth, the official Tower historian for all you Tower junkies out there. I had not read Robin Firth's fully commissioned description of Marilyn's Rainbow, and at least in the King verse, just the proper timeline of how they all came to be. And I know that King did do some borrowing, from just the lore of the Knights of the Round Table and all that different stuff, and there's various other places where they fleshed out, Merlin as he's known here. But jump on King's website, y'all. I'm gonna actually post a link to that in the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, because it's a number of pages. It's a hefty read, but the way it fits in, just the creatures that you see in The Mist and that are described in a few other stories like Crouch End, and also in the Eyebolt Canyon bits in Wizard and Glass and stuff like that. It's really fascinating to hear about at least the way King talks about the old ones and what they are, the insect-like characteristics of them. And it's a fascinating read. It's heavy lifting. It's a dense read. Not as far as length. I mean, the length is significant, but as far as just really heady ideas, it's badass. So yeah, the interesting thing though is the dueling dynamic that King went with this particular story, in the fact that you have the father and the son, and in turn the neighbor who he's had presumably years of problems with, this lawyer, And the three of them go into town while the wife stays home to kind of finish clearing up the glass and all this stuff from this storm that had happened the previous evening. And essentially, father, son, and neighbor get caught with a bunch of other townsfolk in this grocery store while they go to get supplies. And it's very much a self-contained bunker story and shows very much so what happens with people's backs against the wall and the real dark underbelly of humanity when it comes to survival, and just a very American mentality in a lot of ways of, me first, instant gratification right away. I'm the most important part, the needs of the few, as in my own, far outweigh the needs of the many. And so that's something, with the factioning off that happens as the real dire nature of just the threat outside becomes more apparent. And just the factioning off, and you've got, I love the references to the Flat Earth Society, and just the way King brings that up, and the way he breaks the chapters up and gives them cool little headings and stuff like that give you just that little taste of where the narrative is going to go. It's almost like upcoming on the Mist in this next chapter, we're going to have this and this and this. And so, not super spoilery, but just keeps you engaged as a reader and keeps the pages turning. It really, really does an effective job at that. And I can't help but mention the Flat Earth Society and not think of the amazing Bad Religion song, "The Flat Earth Society is meeting here today!" It's a damn good song. Check out Against the Grain. It's one of the best punk albums ever made. Incredible. Bad Religion, my favorite band. Anyway, but the story is still fairly simple. There's aspects of religious fanaticism that inevitably, steep in to kind of mobilize and turn sheepish minds and blind eyes a little bit further. And this is pretty much going to be a spoilers discussion of sorts. So if you haven't watched the movie, read the novella, turn back, all ye who do not like spoilers. Although, as we found out here in the horror show, it's funny how some people love the hell out of them some spoilers. I'm not going to go super, super deep into them, but essentially, the creature carnage is decent, and there's a couple very good beats that are amazingly envisioned in the Darabont film. But it ends with a much more, as I've mentioned on Hail to Stephen King over the course of these near 100 episodes now, anytime I've talked about The Mist, it's a story that has the classic King silver lining. You don't always get that silver lining in his short stories. In fact, it's much less prevalent, but in his longer form storytelling, whether it's a novella, whether it's a novel proper, especially one of those doorstopper paperweight types that he's so notorious for writing, they end up, the father, the son, and a couple survivors, they end up, they escape, and there's a major aspect of uncertainty. Not only what ends up happening with the wife and her fate, but also, what happened to the people that we left behind in the grocery store. What's going to become of all of those characters. A lot of the biggies die, a lot of the ones that you actually grow to care about, but there's really only a small handful of central characters in the novella, and once again, it's a little over 100 pages, so King keeps it at a brisk pace. It works very well, and it did leave things open for more playing in this universe, which is why, in my opinion, the TV series made total sense. In at least the source material, you get kind of a definitive ending in the film, the Darabont film, but you don't really get that in the novella. King left it open to write more stories in that world, and so for that reason, maybe some people, despite the notorious ending, very controversial and the most shocking in all of cinema that we get in the Darabont film, I kind of like the fact that there was that. They even mentioned hope at the very end of the story, so it's a little bit on the nose for King. But yeah, I cannot recommend the novella enough. It's fantastic. And yes, just do yourself a favor and take an evening and read it, or a day or two, couple days, weekend, whatever, if you're not as fervent of a Psy King devourer as I am. But now let's get into the audio drama. Now, the audio drama was actually mentioned to me by a former programmer of the Phoenix Comic-Con's horror, science fiction, fantasy, just the genre panels, basically. Shout out to Jason Alofs, awesome dude who actually kind of implored myself and Cecil and the rest of the team to get involved in panel planning and doing things besides press coverage or having a booth at Phoenix Comic-Con. He was a fan of ours and a staunch supporter, and he basically opened up that door for us to get involved with programming and showcasing the little bit of insight that we have. I always like to think of knowledge as like a speck in the spectrum, almost like opening a door into another room with like 2 or 3 more doors. You can never possess enough knowledge, especially when it comes to Sci-King, when it comes to horror genre in general. But so needless to say, you told me, yeah, it's pretty cool, man. You know, it's full-on audio drama, and as I mentioned earlier, I love the hell out of the audio dramas from back in the 90s, where it becomes such a popular medium. And I was maybe too excited for this. I should have known when the runtime is less for adapting a 100+ page novella than the 2-hour film that came about 15 years later was. There might be some skimming, and yet I have to mention they still, even though they cliff notes it for a lot of the way, and it really just forsook the, just the internal, thoughts and stuff, and also a little bit of the personal plight, perhaps of our protagonist, being a creative who is trying to provide for his family, and certain uncertainties, and also similar themes that King explored in Pet Sematary, which I think was written at about this same time, but was sitting in a drawer when The Mist came out, and that's of how the human mind reacts to just encountering things so insanely frightening that you can't even process them, and how do you even go on living past that point. And so my biggest problem with this is that there's far too many times in the audio drama where its characters basically describing what they're doing instead of just, and saying it through dialogue, as opposed to, just hearing a narrator, or in turn, just watching it play out on film like he did in the tremendous Darabont film. The voice acting is also not very strong in this. It's really not. The son is pretty cheese. There's a few moments that just, I don't know. It's hammy. It really, really is hammy. There's a lot of wooden delivery, and there's not even really that much as far as like creature sound effects, and as much as I was hoping there would be. So many of the iconic scenes, like where they go next door to the drugstore, and like an initial attack of these Lovecraft creatures and stuff, they're kind of skimmed over, and they don't feel as frightening as they need to be. And the interplay with our hero and the young lady, I mean, I don't know. It just didn't necessarily do it for me, and so I might even say that this is like on par with some of the just reservations people had with the TV series, but for totally different reasons. It's got equal amounts of reservation, and I guess at the end I'll give just final thoughts on like ranking all of the different incarnations of this. But as a whole, I was very unimpressed, especially after getting done reading the novella that evening, and then just jumping right into putting the headphones on and hearing that 3D sound going on. 3D sound, isn't 3D sound great? Yeah, I was unimpressed. I was really just, I walked away being kind of bummed out. And I thankfully had all of my love of the source material and then some reminded to me, because it had been a few years since I had watched The Mist. And I will go as bold as to say I think The Mist is Frank Darabont's best adaptation of El Rey. Sci-King. Yeah, I said it. Shots fired, I know, for all you diehards, fans of Shawshank and The Green Mile and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, The Green Mile is an exceptional film, and it has reason as far as just not being scary in any way, shape, or form. It's a reason. There's a definitive reason that it ranks so high on the AFI greatest films of all time, greatest American films of all time, from the American Film Institute. And The Green Mile is very good as well. But I gotta say, and we're not including the woman in the room here, but I think the thing that is so great that Darabont does here is he makes the definitive version of this story. He truly, truly does, with his incredible cast between Thomas Jane, so many great character actors. I mean, Marcia Gay Harden is spine-tinglingly frightening in her bitchery in this. You've got great character actors like Toby Jones. You've got William Sadler. You've got Sam Witwer in here of all people, who, and former former, oh boy, Schmodown Star Wars trivia champion, but also a guy who's done lots of other acting. He was on the American remake of Being Human, I want to say. He also does tons of voice work for Star Wars, and very talented dude. Who else, man? I mean, Toby Jones is great in it as well, I already mentioned Toby Jones, what am I saying? And then you've got Darabont playing with a bunch of different people who would eventually show up on The Walking Dead. I mean, most notably, you've got Dale, you've got Morales, you've got Carol very briefly, but then you've got Andrea, and all of them, especially Andrea and Dale, I think, give just dynamite performances in their respective roles and stuff like that. But Thomas Jane, this is some of the best acting I've ever seen from this guy, and he just embodies our unlikely hero so wonderfully, and the emotion that he gives in some specific scenes is just mind-blowing for me. It's incredible, incredible work, especially when the tide is turning and you know that they're going to make their escape, and then also with that shocking ending, which was very different from the King source material. This movie, I just cannot sing the praises of enough, man. I mean, oh boy, the cast is expanded in this, you know, and you care a lot about many of these other characters, you know, whether it's, there's the cashier girl, and her fate with the bug sting is just heart-wrenching. You know, the military sacrifice of Whitwer's character is just, it's blood-curdling. It's like, it's nightmare fodder. It genuinely is. There's also some changes that I think, you know, he did a really tremendous job of here. I feel like he made David a better character. David is our lead, who I wrote down his name here and I just kept forgetting it. David in our lead role is, he's honestly a better person in this than he is, you know, compared to the source material, for better or for worse. One thing that I really admire that Darabont changed, and I think maybe it was because King had some wandering eyes in the 80s as his fame was getting bigger and he's being interviewed perhaps by, you know, hot young journalists and, you know, the temptation of fame and all of that stuff. It's legit shit, man. It really is. David cheats on his wife. He has no idea if she's alive or dead or whatever, but you know, that does not happen with the Andrea character in the film, and I feel like you admire him so much more for the fact that they keep it strictly platonic in this compared to the source material. Another thing, after they finally do make their escape from the grocery store, unlike in the source material, he goes back to check on his wife. He doesn't just say, I gotta protect my son, we just gotta floor it and go. You know, he cares enough and he loves her enough to actually go back. I feel like they made David, you know, a better hero in this. So on top of those, you know, just little tinkerings with his character, on top of the fact that we do get more creature action in this with that bee sting that I mentioned, with just so many different characters than the ones described, and then even the scenes with the ones that were in the novella just being so much more gruesome, frightening action set pieces. Like, I for the first time in a while rewatching The Mist, I was like, this movie's actually pretty damn scary at times. Like, I'm a creature guy, you know, no doubt, as I've mentioned countless times here on the horror show and on Hail. When they go next door to the drugstore and you find out it's a spider nest, and where that soldier is like, I can feel them inside me. And you're like, oh my God, I know what's coming, I know what's coming. This is another one of the times where, being in black and white, Darabont's film, it works so much better because you see less of the fake, you know, just overly coloredness of the CGI, like when the big tentacles come in, you know, when they're down trying to get the generator started back up, or, you know, also in the spider scene. And man, all of those, the little spiders and the way their faces are like skeleton, like, gosh, and the fact that their webbing is like acidic and it's like burning through limbs of people and stuff. I mean, God damn, all the creature work is so fantastic in this, especially for a film that's over 10 years old now. In color, I would imagine, and the last time I watched it in color a couple years ago, I felt like it was showing that it was a slight bit dated. It's not effects like we've seen in the Meg or in a Marvel movie or something like that, you know, and it's unfortunately not really a lot of practical, except for like severed tentacle and a few other things here and there, you know, like usually when the creatures are killed, that's when they went for the practical. So it was a good blending of both, you know, digital and, you know, just real, you know, real physical things that the actors and actresses could interact with. But it's the definitive version of the story. I had somebody ask in a Hail to Stephen King comment many, many moons ago, what do you think is an instance where a director did a better job than King did with the story? Ding, 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 ding. And who other than Frank Darabont to make maybe it's one of the best King adaptations ever. I know that if you don't like creatures, if you like more things grounded in the realm of reality, you probably would point more so to a Stand By Me, or to a Misery, or to a Shawshank or something like that, or even the Gerald's Game as being a recent example. But I gotta say, y'all, holy smokes, Frank Darabont's The Mist is one of my favorite, if not, dare I say, possibly my favorite adaptation of a King book, because of the fact that Darabont just made everything so much better about it. And the ending is so much better, and yet just it gives things a more definitive, just gut-crushing finality to it. And I love everything that he did with beefing up the story and with some of the little tinkering and changes that he did for it. So if you haven't watched The Mist movie, what is wrong with you? If you're watching this program and you haven't watched The Mist movie, I'm sorry, I love all of you, I'm just ranting. I typically don't do that too often on this, but seriously, watch The Mist for God's sake. Oh my goodness. Next, and finally, also, you know what, before I do that, you gotta also check out the audiobook. I cannot recall who actually did the reading. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's Will Patton, the same guy who did a bunch of the Mr. Mercedes trilogy and The Outsider and stuff. He is a esteemed King reader, does a fantastic job. I would recommend, honestly, purchasing, because if you have one of those monthly subscription credits and you go through Audible or audiobooks.com, or you just have one of those streaming services, because there's a few different streaming ones, Script or something like that is one, if I'm not mistaken. There's a bunch of different ones where you can pay that flat fee and just stream as many as you want, almost like Netflix style. So yeah, I recommend picking up Skeleton Crew in its entirety, because you can use one credit and get all the stories. And The Mist is front loaded, it's right at the beginning, so you can just jump right into it. And there's different people reading every single story. King reads a few himself, so that's pretty exciting. That's the route that I took. But, you can also get The Mist as a novella just by itself. But if you're doing the monthly service, like, why get one story when for the same price you can get all of these? Yeah, I've spoken my piece on that. The audiobook's great. Patton does a tremendous job of different voices and just adding earnesty and just genuine emotion throughout, as he did with a lot of recent works by Cy King. But now comes to the ever controversial topic of Spike's 10-episode television series. They were hoping it was going to go multiple seasons. They only got through one season. Very loosely based on The Mist. As I said earlier in this video, I was down with this idea. I really was. I was like, there's got to be a lot of other stories that could be told when that mist comes over this town. Because not everybody was stuck in that grocery store. There were people in homes, there were people in presumably all kinds of other larger places, whether it's, government buildings or, hospitals, which you see in the miniseries. Well, I guess it kind of was a maxi miniseries kind of thing. Where else? They end up in a church at one point, they're in a mall at one point, so you know that there had to have been other stories that could be told of other people who survived and had crazy adventures and pitfalls and death of loved ones and all kinds of other stuff. And that's why, on paper, I was totally hook, line, and sinker on board with the Mist television series. And then, of course, I got to actually watching it, and, first episode, not bad. Decent setup. I'm just like, oh, okay, they're gonna end up in a mall, as opposed to, just, doing the predominance of it in the grocery store. And I don't know. I was okay with the changes. I genuinely was. And then there's also a few other people. There's people stuck in a jail. There's people heading to a church and all these things, as you see playing out in a few of the earlier episodes. And there's lots of as the episodes go on, there is characters that move from scene to scene and locale to locale. Biggest problem that I definitely had with this as a whole is the fact that I can't say that, especially initially, I was too intrigued by any of the characters, especially with the setup of you've got this husband and wife with a marriage that's good, but you know, she has a town history for being a little bit of a floozy. She's worried about her daughter going in, you know, just the same direction. She gets invited to a party by the, you know, star quarterback and so on, and there's the little power struggle between mom and dad. Mom says, no, you can't go. Dad says, yes, you can. She ends up going. Date rape, virginity lost. Her best friend, her you know, gay best friend, but then we find out that he's more just like conflicted. You know, he might be just, you know, someone who falls in love with the person, as he says himself, as opposed to really being gay or straight, or, you know, somewhere in between. You know, respect, obviously, regardless. You know, people are people and love is love. But yeah, so you know, he's the best friend, and you know, he's like, you know, kind of a goth tortured soul of sorts. And then we're also introduced to a drug addict who is on the run. We're introduced to a soldier with amnesia who has no idea who the hell he is. His dog's been killed. He wakes up in the forest when the mist starts coming in. I've also got a pretty solid Frances Conroy, who y'all have seen in, you know, American Horror Story quite a bit in a few different seasons. And you know, she is a woman who she's an old hippie and loses her husband early on. And so these are at least a few of the characters who are all, and then obviously there's lots of people at the mall, and that's where we get more so like just sub-characters, like the couple military people who were there, and the, you know, the head of the mall, and then some teachers, and excuse me, not teachers, some parents who take note based on our main family's, you know, mom who was the floozy in her past and all this other stuff, and she's just lost her job as a teacher for talking sex ed and all this other stuff. So we've got all of these different like sub-stories for all of these different characters, and I can't really say I was that compelled by any of them, you know, whether it was the rape charges, whether it was, you know, the confliction of the young boy and everything like that, but also some of the needless melodrama that we get as certain relationships form, certain relationships splinter, and things like that. And plus, another big problem that I had was the fact that there really isn't much for creature stuff in this. There's really, in the entire 10 episodes, only a couple scenes, you know. It's really funny. Mrs. Carmody, I'm totally probably butchering her name, but she's the main psycho bitch from the source material who mobilizes everybody, and you see her die in pretty much like the first episode, if I'm not mistaken, and that's where you immediately know, oh, okay, all bets are off. Perhaps this is, if we're going to get real multiverse with it, this is, you know how Captain Trips was in multiple very similar realities? I've come to look at this as The Mist in a, like, you know, very closely mirroring reality with some twinny characters, almost like what they did with the Regulators and Desperation. So there's some twinny characters, you know, because there is a Ms. Carmody in both of these, but you know, certain characters who have beats in one story end up having them in the other one. This being Frances Conroy, you know, she's the one who has the crazy, but it's not super religious, it's almost like dark spiritual, you know, because she like worships the ground and she's a gardener and all this different stuff, the whole Mother Nature aspect. But I can't believe I'm about to start eating my words here. As the show got really kind of going, and it took most of the episodes. It took about 5, 6, maybe 7 episodes. And by that point, I can't say I particularly loved any of the characters, but I really was curious about some of the mysteries that they put on the table and some of the other bits of connective tissue, and also just what was going to happen to all of them. Who's going to die? How are they going to die? And I eventually accepted the fact that, you know, there's this one crazy moth transformation scene with this guy with a tattoo on his back. You know, there's also... there's lots of references from King, there's lots of floating red balloons, there's a patient in room 237. Once again, this took, to speak in past tense, this really took the same approach that Castle Rock is currently doing. In some ways, I liked the end game of this better than I've liked Castle Rock so far, because a lot of the same issues that I have had with Castle Rock in the first 4 episodes, where you're just playing in the universe and just doing your own thing that doesn't really connect aside from Easter eggs, it's exactly what this did. Exactly. And in time, it found its footing to become its own thing. And once characters start killing each other and the backstabbing begins, that's when this show actually genuinely started to interest me, and I became very curious about what the end game was going to entail, especially there are certain things like the twist of who really raped the girl was. I saw that coming a mile away. There was also a couple other, like who the real father of the girl was and stuff like that I saw a mile away. But there was other stuff where, you know, some of the, you know, turning on each other I didn't necessarily expect. Some characters do drop on the dime their loyalties and whatnot, but it's those same kind of themes that as the show went on, it did genuinely improve, and they still never really made it creature heavy, but I became more accepting of what it was very deliberately trying to be, because that had nothing to do with budget at all, right guys? But yeah, there is some genuinely messed up stuff, and I liked how they explored more the Black Spring aspect, you know, this 1800s event that they are claiming everything is mirroring here. But I have to say, when this show just goes in its own path a few times, it's flippin' bonkers, man. They really made the Mist. They still never, for somebody who was just watching the TV show and had not read the novella or seen the movie or anything, they make the government military connections very mildly, but they don't spell it out. They really don't, including like who certain people are as far as military connections and stuff like that. People are seeing dead loved ones and hallucinating and fighting these things. It's almost like the Mist can take the form of people. It's really, really weird, man. And there's a scene with the flippin' 4 horsemen in it, for God's sake. And they kill a character and like take him into the Mist. It's bonkers, man. This show is really just, especially as it went on, it became wackier and wackier, but it was almost like, I think of Leslie Nielsen in that scary movie where he's the president, and they're like, that's almost crazy enough to work, sir, and he's like crazy like a fox, and you know, where they gave this guy, this showrunner, free range, and I hate to say it, but they did have a satisfying enough ending, but they did leave enough of an open door kind of policy where I think that there's some interesting things that they could have done with the story. I grew to like the main characters enough, including the character who became our villain, although I have to say, what they did without, and as you can tell, I'm really dancing around things, trying not to super spoil. I thought it was really messed up what they did with the gender and sexually confused kid, because, and this is where I'm going to spoil, and I'm going to cry bullshit, man, in the fact that they hinted about this kid, you know, they're like, oh, you know, you're such a terrible person, you're so conflicted, you need help, all these other things, and then it turns up he needs help, and he is as messed up as everybody says he is, and it's the same just trepidation that I had for something that they did with a movie called Cynthia recently, where it was like, oh, you know, just because the character is a certain way with, you know, their sexual preference, they had to just run and make them just a bad person. I'd like, what century are we living in now? It's you know, I thought that was pretty bogus, man, and I will definitely, of any of the spoilers, I will call that out, but the last episode gave me some significant satisfaction, you know, seeing characters go as dark as they did, and man, the ending with Francis Conroy's character and, you know, seeing some loved ones and stuff, they do some mess up. I was like, wow, they went there. Okie dokie. I give you cred for going there. And, you know, I wanted more creatures. I never got it, but they did try to make this, they focused on the melodrama too much. This is not going to be for everybody. I still have, the problems that I had with The Mist, especially in the early episodes, they're still there. But it's one that I feel like if you dedicate the time and really stick with it, you will find some enjoyment and some entertainment here, especially if you think of it the way that I tried to with take the Castle Rock approach. It's not The Mist. It's totally not the novella. It's its own thing. It's a separate, you know, twinny verse kind of thing. And when I tried to give it that accepting outlook, Castle Rock had better bring it in these last 5 episodes, man, because I gotta say, in the back half, The Mist brought it, and I actually ended up liking it. I can't believe I'm saying that. I would rewatch the Mist TV series, especially since I ran through most of the back half of it in just a day. You know, those quick bite episodes, you know, it's a binge show. It's definitely a binge show, but I walked away from the Mist TV series. I'm eating my words, as I said. I liked the Mist TV series. When it was all said and done, despite being a very problematic venture, I will contend now that the real lump of coal, the true turd of 2017 Sci-King, is in fact the Dark Tower. And yes, the Dark Tower is the most terrible and noteworthy culprit of that. So if I was going to rank these, I would probably say, number 1 is definitely the film. Number 2 is probably the audio drama, actually. Patton does such a great job. 3 is the source material, the novella. And, I would definitely put the series, the TV series, over the audio drama. The audio drama is boring and, in my opinion, in a lot of ways not even worth seeking out. But, the Mist TV series being something so different at the end of the day, it's tough for me to even compare that story to... There's a couple similar beats, but at the end it's its own thing. It's completely its own thing, and when I accepted that fact, I liked it. So I gotta give, I'm gonna quote Cecil, shut up, I liked it. So I gotta extend a grande gracias to all of the Hail Peeps who tuned into this. I have been Jaime and Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, just at Jaime and Fuego, like you see spelled below. If you want to get more involved in the Hail to Stephen King Quartet, as I am now calling it, I have a Facebook group that I am the administrator of. We have over 160 members and growing. Every day I get a few new requests. We have a very active group of people posting quotes, news stories, old King interviews, memes, pictures, thoughts about what you're reading right now. We are starting the Stephen King Monthly Book Club. I was originally going to start it this month, but I'm doing some traveling and a few other things, and I wasn't sure if I was going to have the due diligence in certain aspects this month. So to start September, it is definitely happening, and I would love to have all of you Hail Peeps and Tower Junkies, constant readers of any kind, jump on and join up. If you haven't subscribed here on The Horror Show, please do. Hit that bell. We do 2 to 3 episodes a day and 2 Hail to Stephen King episodes a week, every Terrifying Tuesday, every Scarific Saturday. So say thank you for all who joined today. I do indeed hope that we have been well met. And until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, sin amigos. I hope that we get to connect again sooner rather than later, namely on the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, but also comment below. I like that as well. And until that transpires, remember, stay scared. And read Stephen King. Gotta read The Mist. Got to read The Mist. For reals.